It is my favourite season. 13-14, we're on part 9, we've got one game to go. There's only one game, so I mean, even us would struggle to drag that out.
Is this the only my favourite season which has lasted longer than the seasons?
I mean, it just shows that we've had the most fun, I would say.
Chatty guests.
There's been the most enjoyable. We've enjoyed each other. We've enjoyed each other's company. We are in the red line, where the company is always great. And yeah, the Newcastle game we'll finish on, Steve. And it's just a bit of a mad game. I think Steven Gerrard is the saddest footballer I've ever seen play for Liverpool that day. He just looks... I mean, he's funny, Steven, is he's such an emotional guy. For an incredible footballer, he was, you know, I don't even know if you'd say he wore his heart on his sleeve. He certainly wore his expression on his face that day. But they managed to win the game, which is, you know, fair play to them for that.
Yeah, I just came away going, they won the game. Wow, like I wouldn't have had it in me. I'd have had it in me to play if I was Steven. Like, and just to think, you know, to have the sort of courage to go out and go, we're gonna just do this one more time. You know, technically speaking, it's still on the line, but it isn't. You know, and I think Liverpool, they do a professional job. It is a bit mad. The thing with Newcastle is, like, they can always be in disarray, but they're still somehow always Newcastle. And I think it's one of the best, you know, praise I could give to Newcastle in a way is that whenever you play them in any circumstances, it's sort of essentially a similar challenge. They could be top of the league, or they could be just newly promoted from the Championship again, and you still think this is a tough game. And you know, when you look at those last 3 games Liverpool had in isolation, they are all tough. You know, Liverpool win 2 of them. No, they don't. They win 1 of them. They win 1 of them.
They had the other one.
Yeah, they would. They effectively could have won. I mean, Daniel Agger, again, you just have to keep reminding yourself he's in the squad, and you know, is pivotal. It's all gone by the time this game comes round. You know, all bar mathematics, and you just go. It's incredible that they managed to do it. I mean, Steven is one of the most complicated, simple people you could ever come across. Really, you know, you can always tell what he's thinking. You can always read how he feels, but then there's so much more below that kind of surface. He's a fascinating person in that. And I find this with someone like Wayne Rooney now. Like, you're a really fascinating person, you know. Like when I see you speaking, then in ways that you never were able to articulate when you were 21 or 22, and that makes total sense because you were 21 and 22. Yeah. You know, I'm just about getting there maybe with working out who I am, and you know they are. Yeah, we've seen them live their lives in the limelight, in the glare of all of this, and to be able to deal with it and to do it is so admirable. And you say that about any of them, you know, Roy Keane or anyone like that, where you go, you're just that bit more complicated than you need to be. But it's what makes you fascinating. It's what makes the world of football interested in you, who you are, and not who Nemanja Matic is necessarily. No offence to Nemanja Matic, maybe a very interesting person, but didn't just projecting that personality and that character. It's why people latched onto him as Liverpool supporters. It's why people who didn't like Liverpool latched onto him and convinced themselves they didn't like him. Although I think most people admired him. He exemplified so much about this season. I think it just would have been so fitting that we'd have won the league and he didn't have to do the next season. And you just think like that would have been everything. And I don't know that would have been the case. I think he probably would have carried on. Yeah. But it wouldn't have mattered because he could have carried on and been a bit part player in the next season, and we wouldn't have had to see a bit of a precipitous decline, which we saw in parts in this season, and then he's able to drag himself. So I suppose you could say, what about next season? It was all on again. Could there have been one more go? But probably not. I think the legs had gone. I remember in shows we went, oh, you could play as centre back, and we could do this. And I think with experience you learn that when the time comes, and the time had come at this point, and that's one of the most heartbreaking of all of the things that are heartbreaking about this season, all of the individual stories, and all the sort of how Jordan Henderson must feel at this point, and then somewhere down down the line 5 years later.
But he's not just winning one; he's lifting one.
He's lifting one. Yeah, but you could, he can tell himself that. For Joe Allen, this was now or never. In his career, this is a great thing to look back at and go, could have been, and it wasn't.
Well, even for the likes of Lucas and Martin Skrtel, who were good Liverpool players, not great ones, but good ones. They could have had a league title as well.
Important ones, I think. Across 3 eras in both of their cases. 4 significant eras, I suppose, because you can't say Hodgson and the Dalglish eras are not sort of in a way, as polar opposites in many ways, but also significant. They're players who just were real club stalwarts, really there, Glenn Johnson, people who just deserved something out of their Liverpool careers, from my point of view. Even Mignolet, the reflections back on him along his career, I think he plays over 300 games for Liverpool, and he's excellent in this season at times. And you just felt they all deserved it. Ali Sissoko deserved it.
I think Steve's being too nice in a number of ways, and I'd rarely say that. But
very few people would.
I'm not sure if that's the compliment.
I know, genuinely, I think it's not. I don't know. It might be. It might be.
It's more of a statement.
It's more of a statement. I genuinely feel a little bit like the only one I genuinely feel really sorry for is Stephen. And I want to be really clear as to why Stephen ends up having a Liverpool career where he has really hard lines in 3 title races. 3 title races where he's been integral to bringing the title race about. And he's done the stuff he's done in the gaps in between. At times it is not too far away from sort of carrying the club through difficult moments, don't get me wrong. But ultimately, I think that the club has hard lines not winning the league in 01-02. And it's an Arsenal run towards the end of the season that's unbelievably powerful, that keeps it away from them. Then I think the club has really hard lines, obviously, in 08-09, where it's basically the greatest ever Manchester United team that stops them. And then there's this season as well. And Stephen has all 3 of these. And I love him. That's part of it as well. Whereas I feel as though for the level of play that they were, I'm quite happy to... Let's use Skrtel and Lucas as 2 really good examples. 2 players, by the way, where people might have some differing feelings about. I'm happy to say I think Martin Skrtel has a really good Liverpool career. And he achieves within his Liverpool career a really good Liverpool career. And I think Lucas Leiva is really important to the club in a number of ways, and it's worth pointing out. Leiva's on the field a lot in 16-17 when that team gets over the line to qualify for the Champions League, and then he moves on that summer, and it was the right time for him to go. But that was the player he was. He was a workhorse for Liverpool, and he helped carry Liverpool on his back as well for a period. But that's the right sort of career. Whereas the thing about Stephen is he's a undoubted, genuine, all-time Liverpool great, and he is, along with, I would say, Carragher, they are the 2 best players and best servants not to have won a league title for Liverpool. And that is not to talk down Sami Hyypiä or a couple of others, who sort of veer into view, Robbie Fowler being one, Steve McManaman being one. But they are literally, I think, just the 2 players who don't win a Premier League for Liverpool, a league for Liverpool, who are genuinely great players who do deserve to win one. It's really difficult to come up with anybody else in the period in question, and that's not even to talk those people down. I'm all right with players not getting to win a league with Liverpool because we don't win one for 30 years. There's a long period of time of not winning leagues here that we're talking about.
I think maybe as well, but just winning something. I think.
So this back to the
winning. Daniel Sturridge's Liverpool career just deserves something. It's why I would have.
Sturridge wins the Champions League.
Well, yes, okay.
He scores against PSG.
He does score against PSG.
Your point, I think where I do wholeheartedly agree with you, is that this should not be the last game this season because they should play an FA Cup final and they should win the FA Cup.
It's just the decisions at Arsenal away from them being in the FA Cup and them going deep and winning it potentially, because they were good enough on any day to beat anyone, and that would have been.
Do Arsenal win it? That's it. I feel like they do.
I feel like they probably do.
Yeah.
I think Arsenal do win it, but I think genuinely that's where I feel much more for Lucas, for Skrtel, for a couple of the others, for Mignolet, for whoever else that you want to sort of, any other name you want to throw in the frame. And also as a group, I think those lads getting to trot around, I presume it was Wembley by this point, on the turf, holding the cup in front of all of us. Genuinely, I want them all to have that. But in the end, in the long run, around Sturridge wins the Champions League with us, I know it might feel like it's.
And he's not in the squad, I think it's kind of like this. It's.
But he does score a goal.
Of course, yeah. I mean, but I think he would have won us this league has been a key part of winning us this league.
agree.
And I think there's something slightly different there, and Coutinho does, does deserve probably more than he gets trophies wise out of this. I wonder if Luis Suarez has thought about it in the last month. I'd really be interested to know, like, as he thought about it in the last month, the last year.
I tell you who I think,
because I think it meant everything to him in the moment.
Yeah.
But how could it now? Having been basically the best player in the world for 2 years,
still playing as
won
well,
everything, still playing in America.
I think Mike currently be banned.
whenever this goes out.
Whereas I'm pretty sure Stephen probably has thought about it. Oh, I wonder if maybe it would be the ultimate selflessness to think that us having won the league twice since now would in some way help. It would be the ultimate selflessness that if that made him feel better somehow. When he's won a league as a manager. You can, and it's why his managerial career, I think. I hope there is a Premier League chapter for him, whether that is and whether that is managing a team that wins the Premier League. I'm not sure that's going to be the case, but I hope there is some success in England again, for Stephen there, because your career doesn't, as a footballer, doesn't end when you finish. If you are someone who goes into management, and that's something. But obviously, nothing will ever match what he was so close to. You're right, 3 times, and again, it'd be fascinating to speak to him about which one he felt was the one that maybe hurt the most or felt the closest. 13, 14, it would hurt the most in a personal sense, you could see, but maybe 08-09 is the one that felt the closest, felt the most doable. These seasons are in my mind so close to one another, 08-09 and 13-14, because in 08-09 when you just went, this is just so on now.
Yeah.
When Villa score at Old Trafford, when they're 2-0 up, you go, well, this is just on now, isn't it? This is
I think someone who's definitely thought about it in the last month.
Brendan Rodgers.
And he's barely got a mention. Brendan Rodgers.
Yeah.
He's had a relatively successul managerial career since, and he's done okay everywhere he's been, and he's won stuff at Celtic. But at the time, we thought we had the next guy.
Yeah, but that's why in the summer, I wasn't even worried when Suarez went.
No.
Because I was like, well, first of all, he sort of, he was starting to not do your head in a bit, but like obviously like with, it was a bit like when he bit the fella in the World Cup. It was a bit like, oh, come on, we're gonna have something like this all the time. Every 6 months he's gonna do something fucking mad, and it was getting a bit tired. But I was like, we've got Daniel Sturridge. We'll just build the team around him.
We've got Rodgers.
But also, we've got the best manager in the league by a mile, and so he'll sort it.
And the thing about him compared to, everyone else is seen as a slightly tragic Shakespearean character, particularly Gerrard. But the mood turned against Rodgers very quickly, in a way that it didn't. Any of the players, we didn't suffer from that, and he's still. I'm not sure he has a place in many fans' hearts still, because I remember it turned like it was like by Christmas, it was all down to Suarez. He's an idiot, blah 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 blah, and it's like his is probably the biggest tragedy of the lot, because he isn't sung about. He's not highly regarded by people, but he was the guy that put all that together. He was the manager. So I feel an enormous sense of tragedy for him. But in terms of the fact that it's so heartbreaking, and of course it is, but one of the reasons I wanted to do this season was just to try and reclaim it from that headline, which is that it was really sad. Because, as you can see, I'm smiling now, and for so much of that season, it wasn't sad at all. One of my favourite films is Casablanca. The ending's really sad, but that's why it's one of my favourite films. I'm not saying that I always veer towards the, melancholy, but it doesn't necessarily mean what you experienced wasn't intense and it wasn't real, because it really wasn't. They always had Paris, we always had Spurs away, there's something in the arc of that season, which, looking back on it, it's cinematic. You're talking about players like Vidic that were one-dimensional. These were fully drawn characters that we were all invested in, old and new. So the players like Sterling, players like Gerrard, whoever wrote those characters, and obviously no one did write them, but it seems like they did a great job in the characterisation. We knew all of them. They weren't 11 robots playing football.
The reason why this is my favourite season it's in the context of what Martin's just said, is because I think it's the season where, for the first time, maybe going all the way back to around 01-02, even before then, in loads of ways, and this is, I think, another reason why Rodgers ends up being forgotten is a little bit. The reason why I love this season is because it made me love footballers again.
Yeah.
Like being a kid. Like I love footballers like being a kid in a way that I've held on to since, and I hope I don't lose. I think there's something that happens between what goes on with Houllier and Benitez, and I love them both as managers and as people and as to what they did for Liverpool. But one of the things that both of them sort of did was they managed to, in your head, if I say dehumanise the footballers, it sounds so grand when we use language like. What I mean is that they made the footballers feel like they were just sort of a bit like meant to be robots.
Yeah.
Meant to be putting this thing together that ensured that Liverpool did good things.
And you kind of sense that if both managers had their way, that would be what would happen.
Yeah, exactly. They would like them to be robots, please. Can I program them?
This is a bit like, I like footballers, I wish you should stop thinking.
Yeah. But the footballers break. You probably would have loved Javier Mascherano to be a bit less like Javier Mascherano, and we loved him for his
Yeah.
I mean, Fernando Torres broke through all of that for me, and he was probably the person. I remember growing up with my friends' dads, who went to football. One was a massive Everton fan, went every week, and I remember him saying he could have only been late 30s at the time, maybe, and maybe I was 10, and he was saying, I can't see them as heroes anymore. He'd named his kid after Bob Latchford, but now I can't see them as heroes anymore because I know their kids, compared to me. And you're right, seeing Raheem Sterling as a hero, when he was so much younger than me, and holding on to that idea of that these are still people that you look up to and lionize. I can't believe Virgil van Dijk is younger than me. Way younger than me.
Yeah.
Makes no sense.
Magnificently younger
Makes
than you.
absolutely no sense. Because he's so much more of a...
Didn't even go to the same school.
He's no much more... Alisson's so much more of a grown-up than I am. And I mean, the great unspoken person is Jurgen Klopp, who, not much more than a year after this, which is crazy again, the timeline is mad when you think about it, comes in and makes it all better because you're on another trajectory then. You're going somewhere else, not least the fact that you then win in 2019 and 2020, massive things that make this feel better. But his implicit thing, doubters to believers, his implicit thing is, we won't go into a game like that Chelsea game where we're not sure we're going to do it. Or we won't see ourselves as, if we had the challenge Man City have got, we'll probably fuck it up somehow. Even though that doesn't translate immediately, you still have Watford away, you still have games, right? You have games throughout, in 2020, you've got, again, Watford away, where games can all go wrong. But you're just going with that implicit belief that we've had since then, and which continues, that you go and just back them as people and as characters.
Well, the Klopp thing is, why don't you just love these lads? And I think one of the reasons why Klopp has it easy in a load of ways. I think Klopp, if the Rodgers period doesn't happen, and especially this season, I think Klopp finds it much more uphill. Yeah. I think we'd had the moments of, it's great when you just love them. Yeah. It's great when you also remember that the magicians.
So you love Jordan Ibe at Southampton,
and
Origi, and even if he necessarily doesn't love them in the long term, he loves them in the moment as well.
And you love them. Yeah. And that to me that's why I love this season. Genuinely, it's why it's my favourite season. And there is competition, but it's also the moment where, for me, the whole thing just makes sense again. Yeah. And it makes sense in a naive way, and I'm fine with that. This isn't some sort of like loving them, believing and hoping and wanting. And the best thing is that you then go through all of that again with Jurgen, and then you go and win the European Cup, and then you go and win the league. So don't get me wrong, it really helps when that bit happens then. But having had that absolute, adoration of just watching them play and just being so excited about watching them play and not seeing it as, 08, 09, genuinely, there was a rumour the day of Real Madrid, and I don't think that people who were in Liverpool at the point understand, and I don't mean that to sort of look down anyone's nose, but the day that they play Real Madrid away, everyone in the fucking city is convinced the manager's being sacked, and everyone who's in Madrid who supports Liverpool is convinced the manager's being sacked, and that's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane, and it wasn't that either. You know, all of that stuff, it wasn't that. It wasn't listening to Radio City coming out away from Wigan in the February of 2009, where people are saying to John Aldridge, John, they'd be better off if you were the manager.
I'd like to think that John disagreed with that.
John, well, he did, but he still, I wouldn't say it was a full throat back when he says. You know, like, yeah, that was that, and that was that season, that was like this one, and this wasn't like that at all. And even that season, like, I will always pull back to the 4-4 against Arsenal, which was a moment of loving them so much in a really weird way. I see almost that 4-4 as being some sort of mad prologue for this campaign, but you just end up in this situation where you got to go. I always remember when Emma came to a game with us, when we got some sort of ticket and a hospitality bit, and I think we went quite comfortably, and it must be around sort of 17-18 period, or even 18-19 period, and I was sat next to her, and we're 40 minutes in, and I said, what do you think? She says, they're like magicians. They're like magicians. The footballers, they're like magicians. And she was dead earnest. It wasn't ironic. It wasn't. And I was like, yeah, they are, yeah, when you stop to think about it. What they're doing and the speed they're doing it. I remember going to a match with Rob's dad, who hadn't been to a game in literally over 10 years, and he said he couldn't believe how fast it was. Yeah. And he couldn't get over how fast it was and how good.
Do you know what reinforces that to a certain extent as well? When you get home games back to back, but one of them is the League Cup. So, you know, the time we're speaking, we've just played Southampton at home off the back, and you go. You can just see it. You can see just a slight, even in a game that isn't Premier League or Champions League, or even a dead rubber. There's a slight drop off, and how the margins are so fine. The margins are so fine, and this is. I think we're on the cusp of that as well. Like, this has been building, but that next era is on the way. And I mean, it's a fascinating. I think this is a fascinating time to speak about it, because we're talking about either players who've been retired for ages or who are still playing.
Sterling's still playing.
Sterling's still playing.
Henderson's still playing.
I mean, the other thing this season has, for me, is Daniel Sturridge, and I can get emotional talking about Daniel Sturridge. I don't think I've felt an affinity towards a sports person in the way that I felt towards him. And when we signed him, I remember being on the coach and people were saying he had a bad attitude and all of this sort of stuff. It's like, he's got the greatest attitude in the world. Yeah. Like, if I see him on TV and the TV's on mute, I'll turn it up. I'll stop what I'm doing. I like to hear him talk. Yeah. Let alone play football. And there are certain, sportsmen and women, David Gower, Sabalenka, that I can't help but fall for. And I haven't felt for anyone in a Liverpool sense since Sturridge like I felt for Sturridge. I felt I was his advocate, and I felt like a child that he was doing it for me to win arguments against people on the
to win arguments. So there was two things that previous footballers I really attached myself to was Emile Heskey, who was you were just constantly having an argument about. And Fernando Torres, who you're constantly saying to other people, going, fans of other clubs going, he's brilliant, isn't he? And they'd go, he's brilliant, and you'd go, look how good he is. And Sturridge kind of just combined the two. You're constantly having the argument, even with our own fans at times, still, around all kinds of tired things that people would say. Let's not go into, some of the motivations there, but just that. You would look at what he's doing here.
But he did it all with so much personality.
And he couldn't care less. Whereas Emile, I think, took the world on his shoulders.
It's like all those people that said he had an attitude and he wasn't serious and whatever. He thought, well, I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to score loads of goals and I'm going to dance after each one. Yeah. Right? I'm going to be so happy. And you might think I don't work hard enough or I don't take it seriously. I couldn't give a fuck. Yeah. I'm just going to score lots of goals and then I'm going to dance. And every time he did that, I thought the amount of people trying to prosecute him just got smaller and smaller and smaller. And so I was won over from the start, but the way that he won over, in the end, I think everyone at the end of that season. Some of it started to come back after he sort of suffered from injuries, but I just thought it was he's an incredible character in a sort of season full of them. But he was one that I had a kind of childish, like I would have had a poster on my wall of Daniel Sturridge. I thought he was the business. And when there was a thing in, I think it was Esquire, where it said he's the first hipster footballer, and it had him modelling those about. I thought he's really cool as well. I mean, he's really cool. He's really good at football, and he's doing it like he hasn't come here and changed and become someone's version of what a Liverpool player should be. He's come here and just been the best version of himself. And I mean, having interviewed him in this season, but even without that, that time his dog got nicked, I was nearly going out to him. I was like, I'm going to find the dog.
Lucci. Him and Coutinho had been such a step change. A horrible phrase to use, but I can't think of another one that in the window before, and the end of that previous season, where it's probably no exaggeration to say they sort of do save Rodgers' job in that sense. I think because you can go, I see how it looks, and I see how it looks when he gets really good footballers. We know he's got some, now he's got a couple more, and we've just gone on another level. Newcastle away, I think, isn't it, when you just go, wow. Yeah, we are something special. Henderson's great, and then Daniel Agger looks great again, because you go, hang on, if you add in, a couple of extra good players, then the players are already pretty good.
And then they have that performance at Fulham where Sturridge
at Fulham, and that was the most Torres-y hat trick you'll ever see, and I mean that was when.
I think people talk about people like Sturridge in like almost as if they go in a kind of cult hero bracket, and I had the affinity that I had with him was similar to what people have with kind of cult heroes, but you couldn't argue with it. He wasn't a cult hero. He was a normal hero because the performances and the goals spoke for themselves. So it kind of wasn't like, here's this weird thing that I like, which I know that other people don't like, and I've got my own weird reasons for it. It's like, come on, and even when he played for England, I remember being up here for a game when he scored for England.
It was the Wales one.
Yeah,
it was great. I watched that in a pub and it was brilliant.
Absolutely, it went off because of Sturridge. Everyone was so happy.
I was made up for him because he really wanted to succeed there. And
it was also a rare moment when it's kind of a scrappy goal, and when kind of things go for him a little bit. It almost feels like he always has to do things the hard way. His Europa League final goal, which is probably the best goal in any European final ever. Well, maybe Gareth Bale, but I don't want to watch that one again. It's unbelievable, and the goals he scores. You say people are great goal scorers or they score great goals. Well, he did both, and it was just as good as anyone. I think he scores 50 goals for Liverpool. It's almost like a perfect.
Yeah,
that's nice. It. I'm scoring 50, and that's that. I think he touched best in the world levels when he was fit and available.
And he kept doing it. He kept doing it.
What you're doing here is pulling back to my point, which was a childlike glee in watching footballers.
Yeah.
And also there's redemption arc. Sturridge is a little bit of a mini redemption arc, although he may not see it that way himself, but things haven't gone well for him somewhere else. Henderson, the manager, had wanted to sell. Literally before the season kicks off, less than 18 months previously, the manager had wanted to sell Coutinho. Things hadn't happened into Milan for him the way in which he'd like. Even Steven, if we're dead honest about it, Steven felt done. Like the idea of Steven getting to win a league title, this is Steven's biggest victory in a way. But like if you'd have said in the November of 2011, has Gerrard got one more big push for the league title in him, we'd have all gone, there's no way, and that's going to happen for Gerrard. And then he's part of all this, and he isn't just part of all this, he leads it. And he leads it in every single way. To go back to, you want to play 2-on-2 against these two, all the best. His entire attitude is, a fucking big ball of us. He takes his top off at Fulham. His swagger is a big part. Like, Steven just decides these are league winners. Yeah. I'm playing with league winners. And Steven leads that in such a way. You can do it with Lucas if you want to do it with Lucas. You can do it with Joe Allen because the first season when he signed hasn't worked as well. There's only really Suarez, who's so complicated because of so much of the backstory. and the defenders who barely count, frankly, who are in this sort of realm of being able to look at them, and Sterling, because he's so young. But even Sterling, you know, I mean, we've talked about it on previous shows, like, we were conversations about selling him in the December, after Hull.
Yeah.
Was it going to work for him, and do you just move him on? Even he had a bit of that to sort of clamber over. I just loved them. I loved the players, and I completely agree that the manager is forgotten too much in this, but that in a way is almost like the gift of the manager is, look at these lads. Look at these lads,
almost,
love them.
You know, every time they do like an anniversary of Istanbul or something, and they, you know, hire out the arena or you know, whatever, I just want to tell those players, I'd love there to be something that just told the players of this season that it meant as much to us. I mean, we didn't win anything, and I know that football's defined by winning and trophies and medals and all of that sort of stuff, but they've never had they've obviously never had a parade, but they've never had a collective. It was great, you know. You should have been at Palace away. You should have been in our end instead of playing, because it was incredible. And you just wish you could communicate that to perhaps players that feel down about it. That you know, for us, it was some of the greatest times in my life, and it was because of them. So there was no pot at the end of it, but there's a huge amount of memories.
What I want to finish on, Steve, is we maybe talked about it in one of the early parts, but it is the first time I remember Liverpool as a team just transforming the city, and that's strange really, because there have been other good seasons, but I feel like they're a little bit different when the adventures are in Europe. Like, you're just always going somewhere, and that's great, but then, you know, everyone leaves, you know. So even 2001, I mean, there were so many games, I always felt like I was going somewhere. That's my memory of that year. Where am I going today? Yeah. And it was that. But it is that game, and it did make it more special that it was just one game a week. They were out the cups, there was no Europe. They played at the weekend and they were brilliant, and the sun was shining. Yeah. And then Monday you're talking about the game, Tuesday you're talking about the game, and then by Wednesday you're just talking about the next game. But that's everywhere. And I remember thinking that the city was a better place to live in, to work in, to just be. And I'm sure that maybe someone has looked into it. I'm sure the economy must have been better. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, people.
I would imagine it dipped because
productivity.
All I did was look at league tables.
Yeah, but then I don't know. Maybe some industries struggling, others in the hospitality thriving. But I don't know. I remember thinking this is great because. It's something people had talked about in the 80s, like, a lot was tough, but actually that Liverpool was great because the teams and stuff like that, and he gave a lot of pride. And obviously by 2013-14, Liverpool wasn't like that. It was post-capital culture, so in many ways it was thriving. But the football team that season just made the city come alive and made it better, and it's happened since, which is brilliant. But it was the first time I remembered it, and I remember being conscious of it and thinking, this is great. This city is bouncing, and big reason is the footy team.
Yeah, well, both footy teams, I think, as well. I think there's a thing about how I think Labour do better if the Lib Dems are doing better, for example. And I think there's something about that with no, they do, and I think there is a thing that if Liverpool and Everton are both all right, then things do actually feel more positive in the city. Had Everton been undergoing a relegation battle, then it would have been a bit harder. It takes over. It became like, maybe in some ways it might not happen anymore because things are a bit more atomised now. But it became national news. You know, it was on the 10 o'clock news when that still kind of meant a thing. And you know, people who had no interest in football, people who didn't like Liverpool would say, But yeah, you're brilliant, aren't you? And I I'm buying into the idea that you might win this. The unspoken thing is Manchester United. I've got no idea what they're up to, and you know that, which is also fantastic at this point. It feels like you're just a little bit. You've got some breathing space. Alex Ferguson is not an issue for you anymore. Loads of stuff is just coming right, and I think the other thing as well is I don't think I felt like this was all or nothing. Even though it's mad to think that because we had Alex Sissoko and John Flanagan, and
Yeah.
like we had footballers who clearly weren't going to be footballers who would take us to that next level, and we'd also shown by not signing Conor Playanker, by doing various other things, you went, I'm not sure actually we're gonna be equipped to sign the next level of footballer that we're going to need here. But none of that mattered because it just wasn't about any of that, and you just believed that Daniel Sturridge could go on forever. I mean, I was devastated when Suarez left. Notwithstanding, I understand it was kind of there was an element of relief maybe, but yeah, the city just felt really alive, and maybe it's just a thing about the age that we were at the time. There's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But it was across all generations. It was across everyone, and I think it's hard to compare with seasons where we have won the league because 1920 is so different in terms of the world was different. And then 23, 24 is just, sorry, the season's just gone. Someone said the word 24, 25.
24.
Is where you can see it from so far out, and it's almost just so obvious that we're going to win the league. This one was just it was a heist, it was a caper, it was the Dirty Dozen, it was everything you've ever watched that made you go, wow, that's amazing, I can't believe it. You know, and week in, week out, you went, that's amazing, I can't believe it.
I think everyone, I mean, I've sort of said this on the previous shows on this season, but as you know, someone that doesn't live in the city, it was noticeable to me that other people were kind of buying into the narrative. They were following it.
Yeah.
And it was a more interesting story for them than City or Chelsea. And I remember at Sound City, I was working, and the MD of Ticketmaster came up, who I've known for years. And the first thing he said was, you're going to do it, aren't you? And he said, I really hope you do. And during the Arsenal game, I was getting texts from those people in London going, and they were sort of asking if I was there. Is it real? And it was this sense of, for a club that sometimes had a difficult relationship nationally with people, it seemed like a season where I would go back to Nottingham or London, and people seemed happy for me.
Yeah.
Which I'd never really sort of experienced before, and I think maybe that was because of, I don't know, sort of like a post-Ferguson world, or there's something unappealing about Man City or Chelsea, but I just think it was other fans fell in love with those players as well. And they had to temper it a little bit, but they were like, you must be having a time.
And these big cards, I mean, Gerrard Houllier would actively not have wanted, and then you coming back to Neil's point about, Houllier and Benitez didn't want these players crossing into the mainstream as characters that everyone would love. And maybe they were right, maybe they were right to a certain extent, because you actually don't want Luis Suarez dominating the headlines in maybe the way that he does. But just for that point, that season, that even just a few months of that season, really, that alchemy that comes together could only really have been under Brendan Rodgers, and could only have ever failed under Brendan Rodgers, I suppose. It's really hard.
I think the last thing for me really is, I think we keep saying, maybe it was the age that we were at. I mean, first, to be clear, it's not like we're talking like we were 18, 19, 20, 21. No. To be clear, we were 33, 32, and Martin.
Man, I was 40. 40.
Yeah, 42. So it's not some sort of like idea.
Getting a poster of Daniel Sturridge.
Well, exactly. No, this is the point. And the point is, it's not like we know what's number one in the charts and all that sort of stuff, things like that. That's not what we mean at all. And I think that's an important.
We've had our first kiss.
Yeah.
Me and you specifically.
and 2 months before.
Space.
There is, with all of that, all the cliched stuff. Normally, when that's the case, then that doesn't count. But I think it is something about the city in the moment, John. I think that's right to do it. But the overarching sort of thing of being so excited to watch them, to go game to game to game, you were left thinking like it was a genuine joy to be alive. And that's something which there was previously excellent seasons, and there's been unbelievable ones since, but the sheer vitality of it was everything. And that's still what I look back now, and what really it all conjures in me is it was just genuinely heart-thumping stuff, and it's what you want football to be. What they managed to capture was what you want football to be.
Football didn't just happen for the 90 minutes on the pitch. It was all week for me.
Almost, but
it was
almost
after the game.
Stop talking.
It was after the game. It just went on forever.
The thing of not having midweek games made that even more the case, I think.
Yeah,
oddly, conversely, less football meant more football.
That's been it. My favourite season. There was almost part 10 there if I had to step in. Up the Reds. Christ.